Welcome to another live stream, guys. After another boring sideways Saturday, we see volatility picking back up for the weekly candle close this fine Sunday evening. I want to take a look at a few potential scenarios for Bitcoin. I'm personally still short from the microstructure I mentioned shorting on Thursday's stream with an average entry of 92,461 US dollars. But I did just end up taking more profits off this due to potential support I'm going to talk about in a minute here, you guys. I only have about 25% of my short positions still running at this point. But I am happy to let that run for now, as I think it's still likely that we could break this support and head a little bit lower yet. But time will tell. Nobody knows for sure. And that's exactly why I pay myself along the way, you guys. But basically what I'm looking at this point is I'm actually going to zoom out to the 1 hour here just to show you this potential support. Like I said, taking some profits off of my short, actually starting a little bit of a hedge long. I don't care if we end up nuking through this support. Basically just covering my short at this point in case we end up getting a bounce here. But basically just looking at this as a potential support level for a couple of reasons. One is I know not everybody loves diagonal trend lines, but just in case this guy here, since it has been pinpoint accurate, it could end up being our third touch point here. With that being said, if now after 3 touch points we end up breaking it and retesting that could be a juicy position to still be in that running position. And I do have some targets, like the title says, around 84K, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But on top of just this diagonal support, we also have this horizontal support. So if I were to pull a fib from here, basically we are right around support, right? Basically at the start of my support fib starting at the 786, but even all the way down to the 115, which would actually be around 86.6K. Anywhere in here right now is fair game for a potential support bounce. Even if we get this little failed break below this support here and reclaim it, then getting a bounce to the upside before carrying down lower. We're just going to have to see what happens at this point. But like I said, I still do have part of my short running because I just think that it's possible this thing could continue running just because we've been in such a bearish trend for the last 8 weeks or so. Bitcoin does look the strongest that it's looked in a very long time, but that doesn't mean that it looks great, in my opinion. And guys, for those of you who are interested in seeing more examples of how I'm looking at market structure, how I'm pulling fibs, some of my trade setups, some of my favorite trade strategies, and so on. My partners at BloFin are currently running this new promo for my followers. So be sure to scan the QR code on the screen and sign up to the no KYC exchange I've personally been trading on for well over a year now. This will get you access to the current promo as well as future promos that they give my followers, plus access to my free VIP Telegram channel, you guys. Like I said, just sharing a whole bunch of examples of just looking at charts, how I'm looking at laddering into positions, how I have my targets in mind, I have invalidations in mind, looking at not only how I'm trading, but also how I'm navigating risk in this market and so on. So if that does interest you, again, scan the QR code on the screen. But that being said, guys, one thing that I did actually just mention this weekend was one play from the bullish side. If people were desperate to get into a long position, was this classic STUBER fib that we had here. And basically we got very close to the 786 there. We did hit a couple of the targets there. And then after hitting that target, which you guys know by now, and those of you who are new here, the reason for this 214 target when I'm playing my STUBER fibs like this, the reason for the 214 is it's basically the opposite 786 when looking at the same range, right? So currently I have a bullish fib pull, but if I would want to look for the bearish scenario here, basically pulling from my high down to where we bottomed out there, where we hit that 786. And just notice that my new 786 resistance is just very slightly above that 214. So depending on how the range plays out, they're very close, and it's basically that opposite move. And that's exactly why that was, one of the main targets that I laid out. And after we ended up hitting that, we obviously just continued the move to the downside. So at this point, I am very curious to see if we end up holding the support. I mean, I pointed it out on the 1 hour. We can obviously see it on the 4 hour as well, where we are testing right now. And that has just been very pinpoint accurate. And so far, we even got a green candle close on the 5-minute chart right along that 4 hour diagonal support line. So I don't want to rule it out. And again, that's just why I wanted to cover myself and pay myself from my shorts and that sort of thing at this level, just in case we find that bit of a bounce. But now, you guys, as I mentioned, I think it's very possible that we end up going down towards 84K even this week at some point. We don't have to. We could find support here. And if we start staircasing higher, then so be it. You know, if we break this downtrend finally after 8 weeks, I am all for it, you guys. I would be very excited to see that. It's just so far, we still just struggling with my swing fail territory up there. Even when we were up here, you guys, I was mentioning that even here and here, I was mentioning that, you know, I was bullish because the price looked strong. The bulls looked strong. But I was taking shorts anyways, just because I trade the charts. I don't trade my emotions. So, so far, I mean, that just keeps playing out. And eventually, if we keep tapping away at this resistance, yeah, eventually I would love to see us break it and start staircasing higher and playing the long side if we have a new uptrend like that. But so far, we just don't have it. So right now, if we end up losing this diagonal trend line here, you guys, that's where, I mean, you probably see it on my chart already, but my green box and purple box down here, that would be my bullish fib pull, basically, right from where we currently have our market bottom from, you know, just that's, well, our local low on the 4 hour, we'll call it, pulled to our current highs, basically. That is the current range that we're in until we end up breaking these highs or breaking these lows. That is the range that we're in. And so far, since setting this new high up here, you know, we really haven't gone back and retested support since that. So not that we have to, but we haven't at this point. And you guys know when I'm looking at the 5-minute or shorter time frames like that, those are the kind of setups that I'm looking for. So on the 4 hour, I treat it very similar to the 5-minute. It would just likely take a lot longer to happen, but I would still love to end up laddering some long entries into my support levels on the 4 hour. And that then in turn, that obviously means that that rejection that we had at this level means that we could be going back down to just retest support of this range, basically. Now, just to look for a little bit of confluence, I want to bring up the ALGO master here for the auto STUBER fibs, and notice that this indicator is laying out the exact same Fibonacci levels that I've laid out. So that's just a little bit of confluence going in favor that, yeah, you know, that's a very realistic fib pull to have because AI is giving me confluence with that. Also, let's bring up the trend master indicator here. And we do currently have a sell. Now, full disclosure, yeah, we have higher trending sell signals and higher trending buy signals. So technically they are in an uptrend right now, but they're really having a hard time gaining any momentum. And basically at this point, I would say, you know, not all hope is lost until we end up losing this actual horizontal level here. After we lose that, we would be losing where we pivoted for this recent buy signal. And that would then be basically confirming that we have a downtrend with this indicator. So, but on top of that, just retesting support and everything, that doesn't even necessarily mean we're bearish, guys. It just means that, you know, retesting support would be a very healthy thing to do. But from there, we'll have to see, because again, I've been quite vocal about the weekly chart for quite some time, you guys. Obviously, we have our weekly candle close tonight. You know, even the fact that it's closing red, I mean, in less than an hour here, I don't think that's necessarily the end of the world. I don't really care about that. What I do care more about is, you know, actually, I wouldn't be surprised to see us just kind of chop around sideways for a few months. We'll obviously have to see about that. But, you know, just like we did back here, right? We tested the 886. The RSI looked basically identical, right? At that same 37 level approximately. That's the same level the RSI got to when we tested the same fib level from last cycle. Same thing. Now, fractals break all the time. It doesn't need to play out the exact same. but everything about this chart looks so similar, and even how social media feels and everything, you guys. To me, what we have right here feels so much like how things felt back here to me. So obviously it could very well play out differently. There's just a lot of confluences. There's a lot of similarities. Everything kind of feels the same. The strength on the RSI, so many things lining up with that. So I just don't want to rule out the possibility of a continuation of the downtrend, basically. I'm happy to see it broken. It just hasn't been broken yet. If we end up blasting through 95K, at that point, a lot of my concerns will be lifted, at least for now. At that point, I would think that we could, that would at least be showing strength, because we would actually be invalidating my STUBER fib setup, invalidating my swing fail setup. But at this point, these are all very realistic red flags on the chart still. So we're going to have to see what this sell signal does here. If we end up printing then lower buy signals and lower sell signals on the MDX Trendmaster. I mean, you guys remember what happened last time we got that? And I was warning about that at about 110K, saying that I thought that that was turning into a nasty downtrend. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. So if these, if this chopping around sideways, printing these higher signals couldn't turn into anything, I would be worried what would happen if they roll over to the downside again. Again, especially with how the weekly chart looks and everything. Looking at the 5-minute right now, it's already trying to drop through that support level. So if we end up flipping that support into resistance, actually, I'm going to zoom back out to the 1-hour chart here, you guys. But basically, at this point, if we end up losing this support here, which it looks like we're trying really hard to do, and then if we end up flipping that old support into resistance, I think that's just, again, confirmation that we're heading lower to some of those fib levels that I was talking about, which would start at, yeah, I mean, the 786 is currently actually around 83.7K. But I'm saying 84K just in case it gets front run a little bit, plus just a nice even number. The 886 is down around 82.3K. The double bottom would be down around 80.7. And then we have, I'm going to say, liquidity grab room, fake out room, swing fail zone, whatever you want to call it, would actually go down to around 78.5K. So, even if we end up going lower here, I don't think that it's like the floodgates just necessarily have to open up. I think it's very possible that we just come retest support and get some sort of a beautiful bounce. I would be actually, as bearish as I am, I would be interested in playing these buy levels, especially if we end up seeing like something on the 5-minute, let's say a 5-minute bullish setup inside these 4-hour support zones here. I would be very interested in getting into some longs in something like that, because as weak as it would look, and that's how support always looks. Support always looks weak, and resistance, the price, always looks strong, right? That's very natural. But a buy level is a buy level. Support is support until it's broken. It looks weak, but it always does. So I'd always rather be a buyer at support and a seller at resistance, you guys. And that's something that, that's what I mentioned on my Thursday stream as well, right? When we were looking at the 5-minute chart. Where were we? We were up here. So that was actually in the 4-hour zone, though. I think it was something like this. I can't remember exactly how it was, but basically we were testing up into the swing fail zone, into a STUBER fib zone. And I was saying that even though the price felt bullish and it really looked like we were starting an uptrend here, we were still struggling with resistance. And since it was a resistance level, as bullish as my gut was telling me to be, I was still taking those sell positions instead. Now on the way down at support levels, kind of de-risking from that, taking profits on my shorts, looking at for some hedge longs at this point. But I still think we can go a little bit lower before I start looking at any serious longs. I really do think that we're going to come down towards this 84K. I just really have a feeling that that's what we are kind of starting to do now that volatility is picking back up, since, like I said, the weekly candle close is in about 45 minutes here. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see volatility kick in this evening and even early tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised to see some volatility in the markets. You know, one thing that continues to look good, but I'm not going to take it all too serious until I see the other charts start to prove themselves, is the Bitcoin dominance, you guys. I've been talking about this for a while, that we have the lower sell signal on the daily chart with the MDX Trendmaster here. And that's the first time that we've had that in years. So I would love to see this Bitcoin dominance just get pushed off a cliff here and just absolutely nuke. And generally speaking, that would be a very bullish sign for the market. That would be very good for altcoins. However, if there's some other weird divergence going on and altcoins just end up dumping with it, I don't see why that would necessarily have to be a thing. But generally speaking, seeing this push to the downside is a good sign for the altcoin markets as a whole. But even Bitcoin, right? Even if you can see that basically Bitcoin is trading sideways or slowly grinding up, doing something, just doing something not terrible, especially if it's climbing higher a little bit with Bitcoin dominance dropping. That's a nice sign of strength in the market as well, right? Because that would be showing that Bitcoin's climbing without even having eyes on it, without people even trying to push it, when people are actually getting out and getting into the riskier assets, but it's climbing anyways. That's where that would be a beautiful sign for the market. But for now, we're just going to have to see what happens. I'm still open to the idea of altcoins going for a nice finale run. Even if this cycle, I don't know if this cycle is over or not. But even if it is, I wouldn't be too surprised to see alts go for their run. But again, we need the charts to prove themselves. We need structure levels to be broken and that sort of thing. Ethereum not looking so good on the 5-minute. We've had lower trending sell signals now for a few hours here, and every time just notice that it's pushing us to the downside quite aggressively. Let me check the 4-hour here. 4-hour, we do have a sell signal. It is a higher sell signal. So, you know, if Ethereum could get a pullback to support, and let's say I really wouldn't want to see it drop below basically 27.17. But even pulling a fib from this level, it's very possible that Ethereum would just end up doing a bullish retest of support, much like what I was talking about with Bitcoin, right? Just pulling back to, you know, we could go all the way back to about, well, 28.75 would basically be the start of my 4-hour support for this type of a range. The 886 would be closer to 28.05, double bottom around 27.20, and then that swing fail territory would be around 2600, which also lines up with the bottom of this range, right? Just a little bit of a bigger range. If you wanted to be more conservative, you could actually pull your fibs something like this, just because that would basically loosen up your levels a little bit. Obviously, it would take even a little bit lower leverage because the invalidations are that much further away and that sort of thing. But yeah, 2 potential support levels there, basically, if we end up seeing a pullback on Ethereum there. Solana still not looking very good. I mean, we keep testing, much like Bitcoin, keep testing that same swing fail pocket. Just really haven't been able to get that momentum ever since basically starting our downtrend. Even here, we did end up breaking this level, right? But again, it never invalidated that 115. So it's a weak breakout at best, and then obviously got a swing fail. But this on its own could technically be a bit of a bullish signal, just because, like I said, it took out this level. But even if so, it is very natural to end up seeing a pullback like what we've got, right? Even if we were pulling back to a fib, something like this. Well, actually, we already did. Never mind. You know what? Something worth mentioning here is if we were looking for a setup like this, technically it did play out, right? We got a STUBER fib on the bullish side from Solana there, but it's already played out. We hit the 786. We hit the 0.5 target. We hit the 214 target. And then, well, technically even kind of played out again here. But generally speaking, when I'm taking these STUBER fibs, I only like to take them on the first test, just because as you keep testing a level, there's a higher likelihood it's going to break, basically. So being able to spot them early and getting into positions like this. I mean, I never took that one myself, but being able to spot this kind of structure where you have a high, higher high, okay, get in at your 786. It's so often that you do get some sort of a reaction like that. But again, just like any trade position, you should have your take profits set and that sort of thing when you end up taking your position. So that one would have played out technically already. So even though we're getting back down to support, I feel like we're starting to test support a little too much. We're starting to get a little bit comfortable there. I wouldn't want to be shorting into support at this point either. Solana's kind of at a tricky spot. I don't know. I don't really have anywhere clear to go from here, because I would say that technically I would rather buy support. However, since it's already been tested so many times, I'm losing faith in it. Let me know in the chat how you guys are doing. And also, you guys, if you do appreciate my level-headed approach of just looking at charts for what they are, you know, not looking for that the fluff, the warm fuzzy feeling stuff, you know, no FOMO, no FUD, right? Like anything that I'm talking about from a bearish stance, it's not to scare you. It's me being excited to look at the volatility from a trader's perspective, because this channel isn't about the long term, the real on long term look for Bitcoin, right? Long term, yes, I'm very bullish on crypto as a whole. However, this is a trading channel, and you know, just want to trade the trade, or just trade the charts one trade setup at a time, right? I really don't care about what's happening fundamentally. I don't care what people are tweeting. I don't care what's going on in the world with crypto. I just want to look at the charts and play very basic market structure, looking for those Fibonacci pullbacks and that sort of thing, just because it's so systematic, right? I don't want to spend time reading fundamentals, you know, doing the scrolling, you know, trying to make sense of the entire global economy, when I can just basically take a few basic trend lines and pull some Fibonacci's and just trade that instead. You know, that's just the way that I like to go. So if you guys do like just looking at the charts for what they are as actual traders, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And what else? What else can we see here, you guys? How are you all feeling? Do you think this week's going to get insanely volatile to the downside? Do you think we're about to pump on the weekly open? What do you guys think is going to happen? Retail longs back to 70%. Oh, I forgot to get that loaded for this stream. Great to see so many of you guys here again. Welcome, welcome. What does the liquidation chart look like below 88K? That's a great question. Basically, the way I see it is actually it's getting a lot more balanced, honestly, for how I'm looking at this. Here, let me just erase drawings. This is all liquidation levels. I mean, for such a long time, you guys, while I've been bringing this up on the 4-hour chart, there has been so much to the upside and barely any to the downside, and we continued pushing to the downside anyways. It's getting a lot more level, or a lot more balanced at this point. You know, we don't have those big liquidation pockets up at 130K anymore. So to me, it looks like even if we do get that bounce, like I was warning about, that we could just chop around for months on a much bigger scale on the weekly chart. You know, it's looking more and more, even just from an indicator like this, that if we do get a bounce, that I don't know if it's going to stick or get much momentum. I have a feeling, if anything, it would be a grab some liquidity and then continue the trend to the downside. But we'll see. I'm very happy to be wrong about that. But that's just kind of how this indicator looks to me right now. I'm even happier right now holding on to that chunk of my shorts, just seeing that we do still have liquidity below us. Thanks for bringing that one up. I actually haven't looked at that one in a little while. And yeah, it looks a lot different since last time. There was a higher buy signal on the 4-hour. we have since had a sell signal. So if we got another higher buy, then at that point, I would consider that this trend is continuing to the upside. But right now, there's a little bit of mixed signals right there. It's one of those times where it's not really jumping out at me just because it's looking. I mean, we'll have to see. I guess technically that higher buy signal, that's basically the level that I'm looking for with that one. So around 87.6K, which is very close to where we're at right now. If we push any lower than that, then that's where I'm saying that this buy signal basically got invalidated at that point. Unless we would quickly get another higher buy one, obviously, then I would consider that again. But if we lose this pivot here, I would have a lot less faith in a recovery from that sort of a stance. Hurley, would I consider the last dip at 84K a valid test of the 786, even though it was just short? The next drop will be a retest. Sorry, let me just reload my chart here. So you're saying last time we were back here? So the thing is, that was, if I'm correct, that was a 786 test. Oh, no, it got front run a little bit. But basically, I would consider that a 786 test. However, since that, we set new highs, right? We haven't tested the 786 since we went this high or this high here. So the range is technically reset for me. So that's where I now once again consider the 786 to be its first touch, basically, if we come back down there. Stu, if you were already laddering into a smaller time fib setup, how would you play if we get down towards the invalidation, which is close to the entry of a larger time frame setup? Often when they line up that close together, I would actually go for the bigger setup or start laddering in a smaller amount on the smaller one, but basically spreading out my average entries more to kind of catch both of them. That may require lower leverage, smaller position sizes, and that sort of thing. But that's kind of how I treat it if there's two that are very close together. What would trigger me for an early buy before the 786 would have to be, I guess, probably a higher buy signal on Trendmaster. Or just a lower time frame one. Basically, like if we don't get down to the 786 on the 4 hour, I would still get bullish if, let's say, we did something like this. Let's say we go lower, we go a little lower like that, but then we end up breaking the trend, right? If we do something like this, where we have a low and a lower low and we break it, and then I would be looking for a lower time frame STUBER setup, basically. So that's a couple different ways that I would treat it looking for a long. I'm just honestly not, I just don't have FOMO for longs right now. So I'm not all too concerned about it right now, but that's kind of what I would be looking at doing. Anyways, guys, I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. I just kind of wanted to do a bit of a live stream before the weekly candle close, just so that, you know, we're ready for a bit of volatility here, because, you know, those are some of the levels that I'm watching moving forward, because we basically need to see how Bitcoin reacts to those levels before getting into positions and that sort of thing. But yeah, basically at this point, I'm happy to go either way. You know, I am in a nice short position. If we end up reversing to the upside, well, I have taken profits on 3/4 of that position, and I would love to see my spot bags end up pumping again. But you know what, just as it stands right now, I just can't get too bullish. I'm just not feeling FOMO at this point. Not even that I'm overly bearish at this point, just because, you know, I'm open to the idea of going higher. It's just that the bulls have some work to do. They need to prove themselves before I'm willing to become a full-on moon boy again. This downtrend has just been so strong and so stable for the last 8 weeks that it's been very predictable to play, and I just don't want to quit selling resistance levels at this point. Basically, if we end up breaking the downtrend finally, I'll be very excited to start longing support levels again. But as it stands right now, I'm just still favoring the downside a little bit. But anyways, guys, one last time, if you do appreciate these live streams, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And just a reminder for those of you who are interested in learning and seeing more examples of, some of my favorite trade strategies, how I use fibs, how I look at market structure, just give more of my thoughts on the market in general, do yourselves a favor, scan the QR code to get into my Telegram channel. And as I mentioned, my partners at BloFin do still have this promotion running until December 23rd. This is for new and existing members who are in my group. So they just do a pretty good job of just keeping my followers up with, special promos. They basically constantly run them for you guys. So if that is something that interests you, you know what to do. Scan the QR code, get in there. That gets you access to my private Telegram channel. Looks like we're starting to dump a little bit again, losing that support. And yeah, like I said, I just would not be too surprised if we see a tumble to retest the bigger range support. With that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends. Thank you so much for watching once again. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Peace out.